What other questions you got? I like this. This is fun.
I guess I have a hard time explaining to clients, like, I'm like, you got to give them structure, you got to give them discipline. And they're just like, but
What does that mean?
yeah. And like, like keep them off the couch. And they're like, but they want to.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm having trouble navigating through that whole, like,
oh, I want to attack this. This is a good one. I love this one.
Yeah.
So generally dog owners only want to ask their dogs to do stuff when they're being bad. Right. And the badness, if we were going to like quantify it, it's probably like 0.5 of the day, maybe 1% of the day, the dog's being bad or unruly. Now, ultimately what bad is defined as, it's a dog who's being annoying, destructive, or aggressive, right? This is what bad means. And so what tends to happen is the dog's able to spend 99% of his day not be having any direction, not having any guidance, not having any rules, boundaries, structure, whatever you want to call it. And the only time they hear from the owner is when they're fucking up, right? And so the problem with this type of relationship is that you end up becoming a warden. You end up becoming the person that the dog only hears from when he's in trouble, right? And mind you, there's the other half of the spectrum, which, they're constantly praising their dogs for the wrong things and loving them and schmoozing them and spoiling them and doing all of that stuff too, right? But there's these two sides of the coin, right? You're either yelling at your dog all the time because you're focused on work or whatever, and then the dog, cut that shit out, cut it out, right? Or your dog can do nothing wrong, right? Both relationships yield a confused or spoiled dog. Okay. So the one where the person only gives the dog any criticism when they're fucking up, well, technically the dog's able to do whatever they want 99% of the day. So the dog technically has no structure, is able to do whatever they want. It's going to be more impulsive, lack self-control, all that stuff, right? So we start seeing that there's this dog who, there's this roommate that they live with that has a fucking temper. And when they decide to jump on the couch, oh, now they got shit to say, right? So it's very easy for that dog to develop a relationship to not want to fucking listen to that person because they go, fuck you, bro. Who the fuck are you? You got a fucking mental problem, right? And then on the other side, the person who loves them no matter what. Like we define spoiling as, I love you when you're good, I love you when you're bad, and I never taught you what the difference was. That's what spoiling is. Okay. Yeah. So the dog can do no wrong. And so when we have a client that spoils, right, who lets them on the couch, lets them eat human food, cuddles with them, has no boundary, what tends to happen is that relationship feels really, really good until it's not. Right? Until the dog is overprotective, or until the dog is possessing something, or until the dog growls at them for grabbing the food bowl, or until the dog attacks the other dog in protection or territorialism, right? And so we start seeing as, because the dog wasn't doing anything wrong, the person had no desire to control them, right? And so the whole purpose of boundaries and the whole purpose of, having limits and rules and stuff like that is to ultimately, in a hierarchy, the one creating the rules is the one in charge, the one with the expectations, the one with the demands, the one with the opposition is the one in charge ultimately, right? So I give direction and dogs should take direction, right? You see this paradigm in parents with children and teachers with students, and coaches with athletes, right? There's a hierarchy there, right? And so when we see that, an individual who says, well, the dog likes it, right? Well, dogs also like to run across the street and get hit by cars, and dogs also like to chase squirrels, and dogs also like to eat shit that's not good for them, and dogs also like to do a bunch of different things that it's our job as dog owners to guide them through what's acceptable, what's not acceptable to us. Doesn't matter necessarily what the dog likes, it's what's acceptable to us. And people who don't see anything wrong necessarily with the dog being on the couch. Now, here's the difference. My dog's allowed on the couch, but he knows an off command like this. Right. He knows a bed command like that, right? So the difference is it's when the individual does not have control over space, privilege, or resources. This is where we start seeing kind of toxic patterns develop in a relationship between a dog and an owner, right? A person who doesn't feel, maybe I should tell the dog not to put that in their mouth, or maybe I shouldn't tell the dog to drool all over my guest's pant legs, like people who just don't have limits. It's hard to develop a balanced, respectful relationship if an individual doesn't even have basic expectations.
Here let me take a quick crack at this. So let me ask you a couple quick questions. Why? You tell me. I want to know. I want to hear your words. Okay. So what does it mean to structure a dog?
What does it mean to structure a dog? I think it all kind of ties in. Like if you want your dog to sit, then when you want it to, then I think it's their whole day. You know, when they wake up, what are they doing? They live in a world where they don't know what's going on. They don't know how to make their own decisions. So guiding them towards like, now is playtime, now is walk time, now is rest time. I think giving them that general structure will lead to them like alleviating that stress. They don't have to worry about all these decisions. Yeah.
So the way you explained that just now tells me that you know what you're talking about. I think it's one of those things that maybe you don't know that you know, but just that information there, I break it down to owners like this. So like the more pragmatic, I guess, way that I explain structure is when we talk about training a dog, the overall for training, again, there's obedience, but then there's relationship, there's socialization, there's routine, there's genetics. So there's a few different aspects to the training cycle, right? It's not just like teaching dogs how to sit and lay down, because I know, by now, dogs can know how to sit, and sometimes you ask them and they know how to do it and they just don't. Right. They choose not to, right? So what Brent was explaining about how it's structure, the purpose of structure is to exercise that sort of understanding of the relationship. Hey, dad loves you very much. Right. Like we love you and we're going to do everything for you and everything else. But when I ask, I need you to listen. So when you're explaining things to an owner, the simple way is listen. If I ask you for now, just for the time being, to crate your dog for an hour an evening when you're all home and he hears you home, or if I ask you just for now to not let him on the couch until you allow him, or keep him out of the kitchen or whatever,
right.
If these rules feel pointless to you, the reason why I'm having you do them is very simple. I'm just giving you opportunities to practice structure. Mm-hmm. If the dog jumps up, no off. Jumps up again, no off, no off, no off. And I'm drilling. It's like any other command. It's like sit, it's like down. Same thing with the kitchen, no out. Right? Don't jump on grandma, stop barking from the crate, stop whatever. It's just giving them more opportunity to hammer home the relationship. And it's similar to obedience, because I do consider the word no itself a command that needs to be built just like any other command. But the context tends to be different, right? Telling a dog yes, they're doing something very different than when you're telling them no. So if you're asking, or a client's asking, how do I structure? What does it mean to structure a dog? I'm going to give you a set of rules that you give to the dog simply for the purposes of you having plenty of opportunities throughout the day, every day, to remind the dog, hey, listen, if I ask, I need you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say one last note on this, and then we can move to the next question, is I always explain people relationships should be composed of understanding, love, and respect. Right. And so respect in and of itself isn't something that is taken. Right. Respect is something that is earned through follow through when it comes to small expectations. Right. So like when I was a kid, my mom would ask me to brush my teeth or go to bed on time or wash my hands or put my dish in the sink, or, all these little expectations that my mom would ask me and my dad would ask me. Right. And the funny thing is, there's such little minute tasks, but if I didn't do them, I could get in trouble. Right? Like I could get in trouble for not brushing my teeth. I can get in trouble for not going to bed on time. And so that demand, that attitude, that expectation of making sure that what they wanted was done is ultimately what made me want to please them. Right, in a strange way. So I was able to, respect, a lot of times people forget respect is a big aspect of a relationship, right? And if an individual doesn't have kind of an unshakable belief that what they needs to happen, and if they don't exercise that through many different parts of the day, it's really hard to expect the dog to actually listen to you in a moment when they need to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So if the dog is about to start a fight at the dog park or running off of the leash or doing something like that, if your dog doesn't take you seriously in general, your dog is not, that starts at home. You always get praised in public for what you've practiced in private. right?
Yeah.
And you see that with kids at the supermarket, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Temper tantrums.
yeah, what parents have control over their kids and what parents don't
Yeah.
have control over their kids. And so you can guarantee the people who have control over their kids at the supermarket, they have control at the house too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's pretty obvious. Pretty obvious.
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
next
That gets it straight to the point. If you had to name like one book that a young trainer has to read, I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch, but you know, if you could name one, what would it be?
Woo. You know, it's hard because it depends on what this trainer knows right now, what they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
That's fair.
I would do this. So I started off in a Keeler method, which meant I read the Keeler book, right? And the Keeler book is a really hilarious, in my opinion. It's funny because of how blunt and kind of rude Keeler is in his book. Pretty much the book is, if you haven't read it, it's written from the perspective of a person who is very matter of fact. He pontificates all the time. And I'm just saying this because I actually like some of the techniques in the book, but it's very old school, right? It's very like if someone did Keeler 100% the way it was written in that book today, they would be blocked on YouTube, you know, like that's how old school it was, right?
Yeah.
But the purpose of the book, the purpose of what he wrote was very necessary for that time, right? Pretty much the whole book is encompassed around, if you've tried this trainer, and your vet and everyone is saying you need to put your dog down, try my method and your dog will be able to live. That's the whole purpose of that book. So it's kind of like the last resort book. Right. And he you know, his book got a lot of flack over the years and it still gets a lot of flack. Some people don't even know it exists, but some of the methods in that book is what's used in protection work. It's what's used in working dog obedience, and most leash training foundations. It derives itself from Keeler, right? In whatever way, shape, or form. So if you don't know, read that book and you'll kind of understand, oh, that's why that method exists, or that's why this happens. It's just a cool, it's a piece of history, right? That book.
Gotcha.
I would read anything by Ian Dunbar, to be honest, right? If you guys want to understand positive puppies, if you guys want to understand, you know, what I like about Ian is he's a dog trainer and then became a veterinary behaviorist later. Right. So it's really interesting to see his perspective of the positive reinforcement field. Right. And I would start there. And I think Michael Ellis is a great gap in the middle. Right. I don't think Michael Ellis doesn't have a book out or anything, but that'd be awesome. But you would start there. You see two extremes, start with these books on two extremes, and then it'll paint the left, it'll paint the right. And then you can understand the middle a little bit better.
Right. Okay.
That's what I would say.
And then just my personal opinion as a little side note. Zach George, that Pure Positive guy, he's on YouTube all over the place. He has books too.
Yeah.
And he had a show on Discovery. Watch his YouTube stuff. He does, I mean, a decent amount of work. I'm not necessarily like the biggest fan in the world. He's a pure positive guy, doesn't believe in any other, but his presentation with his clients is immaculate. So just learning how to interact with these people and the character that he puts forward and everything else, that guy is on point in that respect. So I would check him out. Definitely, I would just go straight to Learberg, honestly, if I were you, first. And as far as books go, I agree that I would get a book centered exclusively, if not almost exclusively, around just the very simple understandings of food work. Mark, reinforce, mark, reinforce, mark, reinforce.
I think there's other additional books. Karen, read a Karen Pryor book and you'll understand it. Now, here's the thing: is there's a tendency of when you read these books, you will get confused. Okay?
Yeah.
Read one book, practice the shit out of what that book tells you to do. Then go read another book, practice the shit out of that. Practice the shit out of that, like textbooks, right? Like you have your social studies book, you have your this book, you have your math book. Practice what's in that book. And you starting to see, when you see all these, you start seeing all these ideas. They're not really methods. They're just ideas and approaches. And then you start seeing how they all start blurring together, kind of like colors in a color spectrum. You're just like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And then there's red, orange, and then there's, in the middle hue, and there's all these different blends. And you start seeing these beautiful color spectrum of dog training. And you're like, holy shit. I see where this method Venn diagrams over this method. And I see where this person could actually probably do this and it would actually work. And now you start coming up with the concepts of what true balance training should actually be. Right. So you start understanding that. It's a very glorious moment when you make those aha moments, right? You're just like, ta-da, I get it now. Fuck yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Right. So just start someplace. You just got to start. That's the bottom line here. One place.
That's helpful. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was watching a video last night and he was talking about introducing the e-collar and why it's important to make sure that the dog knows that it's coming from you. And how sometimes you might get lucky and bring a dog into the outside world and ask them to do something and use the e-collar and they might get it right. But you could also develop, I believe he called it superstitious behaviors.
Superstitious association.
Yeah. How do you know when you're using an e-collar in like a low distraction environment that the dog actually registers that it's from you?
Oh, well, that's what the
engagement.
Right. Well, engagement, and that's what the conditioning process is for. That's why when you start a dog with an e-collar, you've got a leash on. Maybe you're working food at the same time, so you start overlapping your reinforcers. So if I had a dog who I ran him through food work and I knew he was going to do e-collar, the marker reinforcer, sit, that's the reinforcer right there. And then when I'm pairing now this stuff up to e-collar, I'll put it on and I'll find a very low like perception level, a level that the dog barely kind of notices at all. I'm holding the button solid and he's just like, is something happening to me right now? Nothing crazy, of course, right? Then I start pairing the association. So I'll ask the dog to sit and I'll reinforce with the food and I'm on my button. And the dog sits down because this reinforcer is already there. So he's like, I feel something, but I know what this means. I'm just going to follow the food now. And when he does it and I mark it with good, I also jump off of the button. And he goes, oh, so these things are like the same. And I, you condition that down with the commands and you run him back through everything. Sit down, heel, place, come, all that good stuff. And then you slowly start phasing this reinforcer out with the food. Sit with the button, good, button comes off. Down with the button, good, button comes off. And so you kind of use one thing to transition him over into something else. When we did the e-collar episode, we were saying, I almost couldn't say it enough. The foundation work behind e-collar is absolutely everything. Because superstitious associations are helpful in certain contexts. Like, I don't want my dog digging in the trash, even if I'm not home. I don't want my dog, bolting out of the crate, even when I'm not around, because they're smart enough to wait to hear my car leave and then slam the door, or whatever. But also, if you're not accurate with your timing over the collar, you can move a dog into learned helplessness, which is not something you want to do. So that's when the dog is getting corrected or feeling pressure, but they don't know what the pressure is for. And so they don't know how to get rid of the pressure. So they freeze and they don't do anything.
That's just sloppy timing, really.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying is make sure that your timing and make sure that the foundations are 100% clear so that you don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that worked for me. So my puppy, I've trained a bunch of dogs, and I've trained a bunch of, I've trained a bunch of dogs on leash. That's primarily my foundation. And then I've converted to e-collar after. My dog, I trained him 7-8 months with food and leash. Right. And so every aversive was from me. Right. So leash correction, nope, cut it out, heel, anytime that the dog made a mistake, it was from me. Literally, I didn't have to go through the normal process of e-collar conditioning with him that I did with every other dog that I train, right? That I don't have a 6-7 month relationship with training them, right? And so by the time he was like 6-7 months, I threw an e-collar on him for the first time and I just started tapping the button and he immediately knew it was me. Immediately knew. He would recall, he would come, he would do like I had to teach him escape and avoidance techniques around distraction because I was under the impression he just was really, really good until I saw a squirrel. and then so, around eight months of age, I had to kind of guide him through the normal e-collar conditioning protocols, escape, for the e-collar and then avoidance of the e-collar. But he already knew his sits, he already knew his downs, he knew his heel, he knew his finishes, he knew all of these cool things. And so the amount of the e-collar, I till this day I have to use. I probably use the e-collar on him twice a week.
Yeah, same. And
Yeah,
I've got 3 dogs, you know, and it's so it's I will say this about e-collar work is, in order to have a dog successfully, because you can have an e-collar on and a leash on, of course. In order to have a dog competent that you're safe or you feel safe with off of a leash, your markers, your verbal markers need to be on point, and your social pressure and your social cues need to be on point. You know, so if at a distance, this needs to be 100% clear. Sit.
Yep.
You know, at 10, 15 feet away, it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal versus just doing it like this. But being nice and clear about things, understanding the dog's farther from you, and, you know, and maybe they can't hear you, as well. Like, getting those little things down does change a ton. And if a dog who you've already worked on a long leash, it's, you know, it's a simple, like if you were to ask a dog, come, and they're 30 feet away on a long line, and they don't, no, bunk, come, and they're 30 feet away, but it's still a leash correction. Really, nothing changes when I throw the e-collar on the dog, come, and they don't know what the e-collar is, but they know what this is. No, whoa, come. That it still made sense to them. It's just a new tool now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I want to start incorporating it. I think I have a lot of respect for it. And like, there's been times where like I'll have a Bernese Mountain Dog and I'll hit the e-collar, and they're just so sensitive to it.
Yeah. Here's a good video. I honestly recommend Tyler Muto's e-collar video on Consider the Dog. I learned e-collar before this video, but to see this video and to see how it's broken down in a way that is so digestible. Anyone who's listening right now on the podcast, go to considerthedog.com and watch Tyler Muto's e-collar conditioning video. It is very well put together, stage by stage. Anyone who has any insecurities around e-collar, this video will help. Actually, I made it an assignment for my trainers to watch this video. And literally like a 50% improvement in their e-collar timing and their skill set, because, you know, the fear is always, you don't want to fuck it up, you know? So it's harder for like me to teach them. And I was so grateful to be able to send this video to my trainers and be like, watch this, I'll pay you for it, watch it, and tell me what you think after, because I didn't have the time. I was teaching classes, I was doing all these things to get their skill sets up to a certain point. So it was great.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, Tyler's a good one. Sean O'Shea has an e-collar DVD set, or I'm sure it's like online too. That one was pretty good. It's very simple, I will say. It's on leash e-collar stuff. But he too
I would say Sean O'Shea's is good for clients. I think Tyler's is good for trainers.
Well, I think for the simplicity, a newer trainer, I think you'd get a lot out of Sean's stuff too.
Watch both. Fuck it.
Watch both. That's what I would do. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, I wouldn't have you do either or. I'd say watch both. Why not? You know, but definitely, I would check those out. Learberg, of course, too. Actually, Jeff Gelman has some really in-depth e-collar stuff too. Sean's is a little more like user-friendly, I guess you could say, but Jeff's is definitely more in detail, longer form and stuff like that. So, there's a ton of resource out there. And then just find your local, mentor and kind of work through it with dogs. And I would say, just above everything else, I can't stress it enough. The foundation needs to be on point. Your markers need to be on point. And with an e-collar, less is more.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.